This was in Toronto, and one of the many examples of the rise of racism during this COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Jeffrey Tran. I'm a Vietnamese Chinese Canadian, and I'm doing this video to look at the treatment of Asians during this pandemic. We have all seen the fear and discrimination behind the virus. With everyone at home, people are turning to social media as a way to stay informed about the virus and for entertainment. With hashtags like hashtag quarantine challenge and hashtag Rona challenge, it is a way to lighten up the mood during such a difficult time. I've talked to my friend Victoria Gravesande, who I've had many conversations before about Asian people's place in society, and what we can do to help. She was a victim herself during this pandemic.
We heard rumors that there was going to be like a mandatory 2-week shutdown. So we were like, okay, like let's stock up on some groceries. We went into Walmart and my mom was getting eggs in a different aisle and I was in the international section, and some like a middle-aged man, like he was probably like in his 40s, he was white obviously, like looked at me and I was just like chilling. Like I was like, whatever. And like it was really busy at Walmart. But like he like looked at me and he was like, go the fuck back to China. And I literally like I was like shocked that he even said that to me. Like I was scared that he would follow me.
This was not the only time that someone has connected her ethnicity to the COVID-19 pandemic.
When I worked in Ottawa, like earlier in January, I had like a cold and I was coughing. And one of my coworkers asked me if I had coronavirus. And this was before there were like any cases in Canada. And I was like, no, I've never been to Wuhan. And she was like, oh, have you been anywhere in China? And I was like, no, I'm not Chinese.
You know what the funny thing is, like, as within the Asian community, we could tell that you clearly don't really look Chinese.
Yeah, like at all. Like I look so Filipino.
For some Asians, this might be the first time they've ever experienced such a public direct attack. Growing up in a predominantly white town, I didn't really know much about my culture and heritage because I was pretty much the only Asian here. When I was growing up, I turned to YouTube to help explore some of the questions I had about my culture. One of those YouTube channels were the Fung Bros. I think they do a great job of breaking down the topics that are important to Asian people living in North America. This is a video they recently posted about being Asian during this pandemic.
I do think for a lot of Asians, this might be their first time really experiencing harsh racism personally. I think you've always heard about it, but
or maybe you've seen videos for people from other situations.
And now you're kind of thinking, oh man, I never thought I would feel it. I never thought like people were really like this.
The Fung Bros references what Donald Trump said at a press conference earlier this year when he was asked about the term Kung Flu and how it affects the way people look at Asian people.
My question is, do you think that's wrong, Kung Flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target them?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China.
I've talked to Ellen Wu because I wanted to get the historian's perspective of Asian people living in North America. Do you think that it's valid to call it the Chinese virus? And some people would argue like, oh, they've called it the Spanish flu before and that type of stuff.
We can already see there are real consequences to basically associating a public health situation or an illness with a certain racial group or region.
According to the person who posted this, their mother and sister were leaving a shopping center, and a guy who was in front of their car said to them, "Hey, you dropped something." The poster says the mother honked, and this happened.
Hi, I'm so sorry, but I think that was a very racist comment.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, great. I said you dropped your coronavirus.
Yeah, because you can't just look at me and assume I am Chinese. Yeah, exactly.
It's important to understand what kind of political or ideological work those stereotypes do. Right? And certainly there's long been stereotypes associating Chinese people with disease or uncleanliness. Now we can see very clearly today those ideas are leading to actual, like, real world outcomes, right, where people are getting harmed.
Everybody was kung flu fighting.
Those kids were fast as lightning.
In fact, it was a little bit frightening.
But they fought it with expert timing.
There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown.
They were chopping them up, and they're chopping them down.
One of the questions I wanted to ask was, do you think that like the pandemic helped escalated the racism, or do you think that they were already racist?
I think the man who told me to go back to China was obviously a racist. Like, you don't, like, I feel like a pandemic doesn't inspire you to say those types of things if you don't already have that type of thinking, if that makes sense. And I feel like that comment is so different from someone asking me, like, oh, do you have coronavirus? Like, I think those are like two very different things, because one of them is like a place of hatred and the other one is like a place of just like ignorance.
You know, racism doesn't just appear out of nowhere. That's the actions and expressions that it takes in any given moment often borrows on pre-existing ideas and practices. It's almost like a strategic reserve of, racism.
Stereotypically, Asians have been more reserved when it comes to talking about Asian issues, especially anti-Asian rhetoric. As an Asian myself, I grew up with this mentality of just focusing on school and that's it. However, since the start of this pandemic, people have been trying their best to show more awareness using hashtags like hashtag hate is a virus.
1、2、3。I see racists on a cloudy day. They say go back to China or I'll punch your face. I'll guess why you say what could make you feel this way.
Looking on the bright side, and I know that there's really not a lot of bright sides to it, is I guess that this is kind of one of those experiences that Asians are kind of experiencing all together. So I don't know if Asians are going to be more united after this, but that could be a byproduct. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes crises like this to kind of bring people together. I guess that's the silver lining to things.
With this pandemic, I am more inspired than ever to speak up on any injustice. Just like what Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Especially in times like this, we all need to come together and stand up against this virus of hate.